Hello, and welcome to the MentorDino podcast. I'm your host, Katelyn Rossier. I am an architect and founder of MentorDino. Join me each week as I speak with amazing professionals in and around the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, as we are all part of a larger interconnected community. We discuss everything from career stories, lessons learned, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, welcome to the conversation. And if you like this episode, please do me a favor by hitting subscribe, like, or share it with a friend. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own unique career journey. On this episode of the MentorDino podcast, I want to talk about fellowship, and this one specifically with the AIA, or the American Institute of Architects. So there are different organizations where you can be elevated to fellow. So you could be elevated to fellow through CSI, ASHRAE, AIA, and it's really a culmination of highlighting your career and making a difference in the profession. So this time I want to highlight through a few AIA fellows I've had on the podcast. This first one, Edmond Gauvreau, was episode number 10. And I was so happy to have Ed on the podcast because that was the first time I've ever talked to an AIA fellow and really learned about the process of becoming a fellow, about the different components and how those are different. And so I always just thought AIA fellow was just a general thing, not niche down to figure out different types of components, whether it be education or design. There are different ways to leave an impact on the industry. And so it was great to learn more about that and how each fellow has a different component to it. So now I have better questions whenever I reach out to fellows to see what they did, how they left an impact, and the little component that they are along the way. So I'll be highlighting also two other fellows, but I figured I'd start out with Edmond because it was the first time that I learned what it takes to become a fellow and what that really means to somebody once they reach that component of their career. So hope you guys enjoy learning from Edmond. And again, he was episode 10. Yeah, so let's dive into the fellow program.
Yes.
So I know a lot of students in college, they kind of get AIA because of AIAS, but soon as you throw fellow out, they get kind of confused on what that means, what the process is. And I know we've even talked about there's multiple categories of fellow. Can you kind of describe your story and a little bit about it?
I can do that. Well, first of all, if somebody at my graduations had said I would be a fellow in AIA, I would have probably asked, "What did you smoke last night?" But seriously, I think because my career was so varied, I knew it was there, but it wasn't really something I thought about. I think it took until about 5 years of poking from colleagues who were fellows, including a couple chancellors of the College of Fellows, basically said, "Okay, I get the hint." Now, and so of course started looking into that, and I looked at the body of my work, says, "Well, I might be able to do this." Now, when you apply for fellow, if you go to the fellows page, they now have 6 objects that you can be elevated to. And let's see. First one is design. Of course, that's self-explanatory.
Mm-hmm.
Second one is practice, and there's subdivisions in that with dealing with your technology or management or what have you. Third one is service to the institute. Say, for example, you were extremely active within AIA and you've had leadership positions and that sort of stuff. Fourth one is service to service to people, which includes government, and that's the category, and that's the object that I was elevated within. The fifth one is sort of a catch-all. It's sort of a miscellaneous that odds and sods, as I say, that doesn't fit in any other category. And then they separated a new one that started a year ago, which now is education, because a lot of the education stuff was coming up through Object 2. And I think there was just so many people there that, okay, we're just going to create a separate object. And so when you do as fellow, you will pick one of those objects that you want to be elevated in. Now, when at least with the DC chapter, when you go through our coaching program, I mean, and everybody there is a fellow, so I mean, they all are looking, but they will look at your work with a very critical eye, and they'll say, "Oh, you said object 4. Maybe you should be object 2, or what have you." And that's stuff you need to think about.
When you say
Uh,
coaching, are they like training you or reviewing
it's sort of a little
you?
bit of both. Uh,
Okay.
Very short. In DC, we have one of the best programs to prepare candidates for fellow. You have to do like a 5-page summary of your work, and your resume is considered by the fellows committee within the DC chapter, and they can make the initial determination of whether you qualify for the program or not. And I will tell you, not everybody always gets in. Uh, but we go through, and then it's a 6-month program, or as some of us affectionately refer to it as boot camp, because you have a schedule, you have deliverables, you have presentations, and the nice part is that we'll break up and we'll move you around to the different fellows so you get various perspectives. But I will tell you, the hardest jury you will ever go through is the first time you have to put your 35-word statement up on the wall, and you have 30-some people in the room can all throw stuff at it or will question it. If you thought your college juries were tough, this is a real tough one. And there's not even a building involved.
It's
it's
just
just a couple
words.
of sentences. Yes. But those words are important because it serves as the basis of why you want to be elevated, and it's also the hook to get the jury interested. Okay, what is this person saying that they want to do? And it is something you basically have to create a storyline. I mean, that's the statement is the basis of your storyline, and it says what are the major points of how you get elevated, and then of course it's your work, it's your involvement with AIA, it's any publications, it's any speaking stuff. That all has to be accounted for, and then of course you have to put your exhibits, which okay, then you get to pull out the pictures and the pretty drawings and that sort of stuff. But I tell folks it's both a writing exercise and a design exercise, because hey, we're visual critters, so yes, we want it to look nice, and it reads well. But also the fact is, as they say, words matter, and you really have to go through the words. And especially for us government types, we have to stay away from acronym heaven and spell things
Hmm.
out, because another thing you have to consider is that you have to consider that you have no friends on the jury and they have no clue what you do. So you have to basically, I won't say dumb it down, but you basically have to make it very clear that what you do not assume that they know all the acronyms. I mean, and certainly the military has its own set of acronyms unto itself. So that was one of the challenges I went through. And then, of course, you also have to get 7 letters of recommendation. And but then you basically you beat yourself over your head for 6 months trying to craft it all right, take all the input, figure out, okay, what's actually good, what's okay, and then there's some stuff you'll get, okay, okay, appreciate your thoughts, thank you, because at the end of the day, it's still your submission. It has to be you. It has to be your voice. And
Yeah.
that's the hardest part. I mean, and the jury, of course, the fun part is now I recognize some of my peers who are now sitting on the fellows jury, and it's just the case is that hey, we've all been through this. We all we can pretty much figure out what when there are true voices and when something's coming out that either came out of the marketing department or just does not read well at this point. Uh, and I will tell you, last year the jury was especially tough because the percentage of submissions that were elevated to fellow was like only a third. It normally had been about 40%, but last year was like only 33%. So last year was an especially tough lift for folks.
Now, is there like a quantity they look for, or is it just
No, it
based
is not.
on?
There is no quotas. I mean, that's always been a thing. Says, oh, there's no, there are no quotas. It's strictly based on the quality of the submission. What happens is that when they get, and they're going through this now, you get the number of submissions. AIA makes sure, okay, did you at least follow the requirements that of what had to be submitted? Are you eligible? Did you are you are you current on your licensure and on your continuing education? Once they do that, they split the big pile into 7 smaller piles. Each of the jurors gets their pile, and they then spend a couple of months because the assigned juror will read their assigned submissions cover to cover, and they will be the ones that present when the jury convenes in late January, early February. And they will present, they'll say, okay, this is Ed Gauvreau, he's going to object 4. These are the strengths that I see. These are areas that we need to talk about. And they all look at stuff, and yeah, they will discuss in terms of, hey, has he really raised the bar for the profession? Is it just his day job, or did he do go above and beyond the day job? Because there are folks that will come through and says, well, isn't that what you're supposed to be doing? How did you really raise the bar? I will use a takeoff of what Justice Douglas said years ago regarding pornography. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. And I think this a similar thing goes with architects. I can't describe a successful fellow's proposal, but I know it when I see it. And pretty much,
Hmm.
I can even see when we do the last round of reviews before we submit the DC candidates in. I usually at that point can pretty much have a pretty good idea. Okay, these are the shoe-ins. These are the ones that are pretty close. And these are the ones, okay, we're going to send them through, but I don't think they're going to make it. And surprisingly, I've been pretty accurate on it for the last several years when I've done that. Now, this year I
Yeah.
did not participate because I was sponsoring a candidate from New York, and I wanted to concentrate all my efforts on getting her through the process. But
Now, trying to remember what I was going to ask. For the people who don't get fellow, do they get feedback on
yes,
like why?
yes, they will get they will get feedback in terms of how the strength of your sponsor letter, in terms of your overall presentation, areas which they thought that could use improvements, or things that were not, things that were strong, things that were not strong. Uh, it doesn't really get down to the nuts and bolts, but at least it gives you an idea. Uh,
Yeah.
Now, if you do not get in the first time, you are allowed to reapply a second and a third year. But if after 3 consecutive attempts you do not make fellow, you then have to sit out a year and then start the cycle over again. And
Gotcha.
like I said, we've had candidates that we've had a couple of candidates from DC who stuck through third time. They got through on the third time. And I think they're both still smiling at this point. So
Now, you speak about fellow like it's a smaller
it is.
camaraderie. Like, can you speak about that?
Sure. I always maintained being the College of Fellows is the fraternity I never got to join in college. But it's only 3% of all AIA members that are in the College of Fellows. It is very much, these are folks who, in various aspects of the profession, have raised the bar. Now, of course, when I got in, I just said, oh my God, but when you had investiture, there's a luncheon before that where everybody gets in there and you start talking to everybody and and they say, well, this is what I did for it. Oh, that's interesting. And you all of a sudden that everybody does different stuff. And you find those stuff that is really intriguing. The fact is that the great diversity of folks, even like within particular objects, that you just say, "Whoa, that's interesting. We need to talk later." And yeah, I have established some very good friendships, both within my fellows class, but also with other fellows. Uh, I'll tell you a true story. About a year after I made fellow, one of our district commanders in Japan, who graduated from the University of Miami with his architecture degree, he was trying to get folks from Miami to come out and be like summer students or even to get full-time employment. he's calling his old professors, and he's not getting the time of day out of them. He says, Ed, I'm not getting anywhere. He says, Tom, let me take a shot at it. Well, it turns out Elizabeth Platter Zyberk, who had been the dean when Tom was there, she had stepped down as dean but was still on the faculty, and I had met her briefly a couple of times. So I craft an email to Liz and say, we have a common in Tom Farrell, and I described the situation and said, hey, could you possibly help? A day later, I get an email back from Liz saying, Ed, got your email. We're willing to help. We can do this. And like within a week, Tom's getting inundated with from professors. What could we do? What can we do to help you? 3 months later, he's in DC for a meeting, and he says, Ed, what the heck happened? All this stuff happened. I says, Tom, there are times in life where getting an F is a good thing. But it just shows the fact is that it's not 6 degrees of separation within the fellows community. It's more like 1 to 2 degrees of separation in
Mhm.
terms of being able to find folks who do stuff. And I will say that if you talk to AIA National, if you're FAIA, they tend to return your messages a lot faster.
And you speak about like your FAIA class and like a fraternity. Are you closer with the people of your class, or does it
Uh,
become more of the
it's pretty.
holistic, bigger
It's
community?
more holistic at this point. I will. So simply the fact is that I've met fellows from. I mean, who have been fellows for a long time, and then of course some of the more recent fellows is that we've had some communications. Uh, I think the fact is that all of a sudden you get the F, and of course it's not just the fact is that it's not just for what you've accomplished; it's also for what you start giving back to the larger institute at this point. I mean, I take that pretty seriously. The fact that I've been extremely fortunate to actually have done a body of work that my peers consider worthy, and so it's like I said, it's an honor I never really expected to get, but the fact that I've received that, I will certainly embrace it for everything that it's worth, both the personal accomplishment, but also the fact is that I am. It's called start bringing the next generation up with you. Right now, in fact, I am mentoring a young female architect in DC, works for a construction company, very bright. She is the current chair of the project delivery knowledge community. And I just got some late breaking news. She had asked to put in for an at large position on strategic council. And she just found out this afternoon that she is now a member of the AIA Strategic Council.
That's awesome.
Yep. So, uh, and Laura, a couple years ago, says, I want to go for fellow. I says, and how long have you been a full member? Just over 2 years. I says, well, you got 8 years before you're eligible, but and we meet on a regular basis, and every time we bring up a fellows conversation in terms of, okay, what have you done recently? Okay, I hope you have. She has a file where I keep reminding her where if you made a presentation or there's an award or you got another position, it goes into your file so that when the time comes when you're eligible, you have all that material handy. We don't have to go looking for it, and we can start building your case.
All right. And welcome back. Now, I've got two other fellows I want to introduce you guys to. And what's important about these two is it really changed what I thought a fellow was. When I learned about AIA fellowship, I always thought it was the very senior professionals. You had to be near retirement age to become a fellow, and they were all more senior and traditionally all older white men along the way. So these next two, I am pleased to say you don't have to be senior and about to retire to become fellow. You do have to be a member of the AIA for 10 years, but once you're there, you don't have to wait till you're a member until 40 years down the line. If you can start to pull things together, you can start building your case. So, this next one, I want to introduce you guys to Jeff Pastva. He is episode number 39 and in the state of Pennsylvania with me. He actually went the real estate development side. So you don't have to be a traditional architect. in that sense to become an AIA fellow. So we talk a little bit about his fellowship and being a professional in the real estate development side and still being able to leave an impact on local organizations focused on architecture. So I hope you guys enjoy learning a little bit from Jeff.
If I wasn't doing CA and I wasn't doing CDs, I feel like I was doing a lot of feasibility studies, as an architect, towards, maybe not necessarily towards the end of like kind of architect path, like before kind of, I'll say not, I could say pre, post, architecture, but that kind of end of that phase, lots of clients were coming in, and that they were the type that were doing lots of smaller projects. And so there was like a quick turnaround, but they needed a lot of feasibility studies of like, what can we do and what we do by right in particular. So I got really good at like the zoning code of Philadelphia and the building code, and knowing like how those two things play off. A lot of the work I was doing in the last architecture firm and now real estate firm is in Philadelphia. So knowing those kind of codes, hopefully that doesn't get replaced by AI, but I think that there's still value in like having quick recall about what are the parameters that I can work with, and how do I, maximize the design and the income potential of any project.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be important because not everyone's going to search it, and the accuracy of AI in the AEC industry isn't there yet. So I think we still have some time where our own brains are going to be the better power for a while.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. But I want to switch over to your involvement with the AIA and mentorship. Can you explain some of the roles you've had within the AIA and AIA adjacent?
Yeah, so this might have even been like one of the opening questions, but I think we get there eventually. Is that, and I think one of the things I did kind of mention that I think if I look back, really informed how I got involved, in that I felt like I had to build my network from scratch. And so, first couple of years, I didn't do as much with like the associates level, but I had benefited from kind of AI Philadelphia was doing some area study sessions kind of when I was studying for my tests. And like the minute that we'll say a couple, I didn't take a big hiatus. Like some people, pass their tests and they go on to the next thing. I think I might have taken like a couple months off and then said, all right, well, how do I kind of get back? And so I hooked up with the person who was running them. Her name's Denise Thompson, and she was the co-chair. Well, she was the area study kind of group chair and kind of the chair of the local YF at the time. And she was running a lot of that by herself, as kind of like someone who had kind of restarted. I think like years ago, there was like a YF locally in Philadelphia, like the early 90s. And then kind of it went dormant for a little period. She brought it back around 2009. So she was really the first person to resurrect it, but doing a lot of it on her own. And so there was limited capacity that I don't want to say one person, because I think I did a lot when I was doing it a lot by myself, but like she had limited when she was doing it. She was doing like, maybe a program every quarter type of thing, or event every quarter. But I wanted to get back. I said, you help me with my study sessions. Like if you had a second person doing this, what could you do? And she said, well, at the very least, we could have, sessions every other week, right? Instead of once a month, we can now run them every other week or something like that, and try to cover more ground. Or we could say that, having someone more recent, because I think she had taken an older version of the test. Now I had taken what was 4.0. I think I can't believe I'm not really remembering, but she was in 3.1, I think, and I was in 4.0. And so like now her knowledge was becoming less relevant to like the next kind of class of takers. So started like working with her, finding a way to like, kind of, again, giving back to what she had helped me do, but then how do we scale this up? And so that was my entree in. And then we said, well, all right, well now I'll architect. Let's do some more other types of programming. And I just really started taking off. I mean, I just, between the two of us bouncing ideas off each other, just like, business partners, I think if you think about it, if you're starting your own firm, and I've even thought this and told people that, like, I probably wouldn't start my own firm. Like, doing the things that I've done with AIA even has kind of given me this insight that, like, I enjoy and prefer to have like a partner in probably anything that I do, because as good as I think I might be in different areas, like, I don't know everything, and I always like to bounce ideas off of. And so I think we started this rapport where we had different skill sets. She was in healthcare, I was in more like housing, so we knew different, kind of sides of kind of architecture and styles, and small firm, larger firm type of thing. So we had a very good dynamic. Just started running lots of programs at the local level. Anything, whether it's a happy hour, whether it's portfolio reviews, more study sessions. We started doing more, which I think was the first, and unfortunately it never really carried on, but we were doing some fellows and young architect events. That was something that the College of Fellows has traditionally had at the national level, a very strong relationship with the YEF, but it doesn't always trickle down to the local level. So we saw that disconnect, and we said, how do we do this? And we did have a series of events, but it didn't have the continuity. But we were always like, how do we keep something? How do we do something new? And we did a lot of kind of integrations or kind of sponsored events that just kind of hadn't, as far as I knew, hadn't been done before. So we wouldn't just do things with architects. We had an event with the American Composers Forum, because we found some common thread in music, and we said, architecture's frozen music. They said, so we had like a design charrette with composers. We had a happy hour with some like makerspace places, like makerspaces and co-working spaces were just kind of starting out around that time. So we said, how do we kind of extend kind of the network to other design kind of fields? And we made some inroads there. We did more with like ULI and with AGC, which locally is called the GVCA. I think Pittsburgh, it's the Master Builders Association, I think is the counterpart. Yeah. So we were trying to find more young groups and saying, like, how do we like get more collaboration, whether it's an event, an article, a charrette. We did a bunch of design charrettes. So like we were just like just trying to create as a lot of buzz, because at the time, and I think that there still was that, I think emerging professionals feel more heard now, but there wasn't a lot of focus on really anyone like under the age of 45 in AIA. And it was around like 2014. So this is, it was just kind of starting, but I think in like 13 or 14, after we had started doing some of this work, like AIA started pivoting to, how do we support kind of this next generation? And because we started laying some groundwork, we were kind of at the right time where we started getting tapped for other leadership positions. And so as she kind of, and this is maybe a piece of advice, like if you are in, whether it's AIA or, or in a firm, if you're able to find someone that maybe is just, there are mentors, but like if you in mentees relationships, but you find someone who's just maybe a couple of years older than you, as they kind of grow, if you can kind of draft on their coattails a little bit maybe and benefit, right? And so one could be like think about like if someone gets a promotion and you're the next person in line, well then you might get a promotion too, because one person got promoted up. Well, now it's your turn to kind of fill that kind of person who's just above you's role. And so I felt a little bit in the AIA world, Denise was elected to the board of directors in 2013, I think it was, or 2012 or 2013. And so she left a void to be the chair of the YF. And so as her co-chair, sometimes you can just be a co-chair for years, but because she was kind of advancing in her AI career, then I kind of filled like the next leadership role. And then I felt like I had an ally on the board, because now here's someone who I've worked with extensively built that network, and now that person is on the board. It can advocate for me, if necessary, and I would advocate for her. And so that kind of started this kind of journey where, like, in YF world, and probably in every AIA chapter that's kind of maybe a medium size to a large city, like, there are different things you can jump around to and find, like, that what's the next role, like, how do you climb that next ladder? Not that I was ever considering myself like a corporate ladder climber, but, like, if you want to grow, I do think that sometimes it means, like, how do you get that next big role? And so, I went from kind of co-chair, understudy, call it, of the local YF, to the chair of the committee. And then as my network grew and I had more friends on boards who could vouch for me or write letters for me, what's called the YARD position, which is now called the YAR, Young Architect Representative, which was representing this, at the time it was it still is a single state region. So Pennsylvania still has one, but at the time there was like regions. So like one YAR or YARD was representing like 4 states sometimes. Pennsylvania had its own. So I was still competing against people from, say, Pittsburgh who wanted to do it. But again, I had people who were vouching for me and writing letters. And so when that position opened up, I already had someone saying, hey, you should do this. So people were kind of helping me, like, plot my path, because I might not have known that was like a thing. She let me know. So I went from kind of local chair to YARD. And then once I was there, I had already been a little bit involved in Connection, which is kind of the magazine, the YF's magazine, magazine. I had actually kind of built a reputation with the leadership and the rest of the young architects, like regional directors, before I was one, because I was helping out kind of with Connection in 2013 concurrently with some of my YF local experience. And so this is just kind of like the spider webs of, like, if you get involved in a lot of things and, even if you don't know where it's going, you kind of open doors to, like, jump from one thing to the next, as opportunities present themselves. So, follow this path again. I had, I was in the YARD position, but the kind of term for the communications director on the YF kind of advisory committee was opening the following year. And because, again, I was involved in Connection and continued my involvement, I had kind of risen to be kind of one of the kind of deputy editors, we'll call it, right? And so there was like 2 of us that were kind of at the same level. And so one of us was likely going to get it. So I actually didn't have to do a full kind of 2-year term as the YARD, because this position opened up and I was able to kind of get into that. Again, all kind of aligned with my passions, all aligned with my skill sets, all aligned with, like, things that just made a lot of sense. And so very quickly, I would call it, went from kind of local chair to national advisory committee member, right? That was really like a 1-year difference between the two, because I was so involved. So that was kind of that. And then I think from there, it was like, you kind of get more visibility and people start tapping you and asking you to do different things. So at the peak of my kind of involvement, at that point, I was asked to be on the Philadelphia board, the Pennsylvania board, and I was on the AdCom. So, I had kind of local, state, and national involvement all simultaneously. And so that just kind of really continues to spread, like, your influence and who you know. When I say you go to conference, then, I know people at every single one of those levels, and generally the ones that are from national, the ones I might not see often. So I would use the time that I had to try to catch up with them for like 3 days that I would be there. So that's, kind of a long-winded thing maybe, but, like, that's like a little bit of the arc, right? That's kind of how I got my start. It was like, and again, not unlike maybe being in a small business, is that, like, I would say, if I'm going to be the chair of this thing, I want this thing to be the most successful. I want people to, like, come to my events. And I'm the, again, it was two of us, but a lot of times, if Denise was doing one thing, like I might be responsible for like making flyers and promoting and getting people there. It's like, if I'm going to put all this effort into it, I need to make sure that, there's a critical mass of say 30 people. Like 30, to me, 30 people at an event was always a success. If we get 30 people and we would continue to get 30 people, like at, once a month, we're getting people together for like different things. And so, if you're going to put yourself out there, like really do it and figure it out. So I think that's kind of how it served me to get to the next thing. And every level, I would always like, what deliverable can I kind of put out? Like, what can I do? I don't want to just sit in this chair to say that I'm the chair of something or I'm the president of something. Like, I want outcomes to show that, like, in the time I had, I really want to look back and say, like, look at all the stuff that, we accomplished. So,
yeah, more than checking a box, but making a difference in the architect community.
Yeah. And hopefully having fun along the way. Like, I'm not doing these things because someone's twisting my arm. It's like, if someone, again, gives me, what is it that you want to do? And so maybe this is another, like, maybe a career point is like, you might be told what to do in your firm, but if you're doing a volunteer thing and people say, what do you want to do? Well, then I'll give you a little bit of, you might not get a lot of financial resources to do it. So if you're willing to like work with, $1,000 here, $500 there, whatever you can kind of scrap together. And if, I wouldn't say that I was the best fundraiser, but like, if you can, fundraise and get some more money, that's the kind of thing that you can run the thing you want to do. So I thought it was important to run and like portfolio reviews. I created an event we called Elevator Pitch. And the idea was that we would put, instead of having architects just like presenting their designs, it was like, well, and this was around the time Shark Tank was starting up. So I can't say I didn't take inspiration from that, but I said, pretend you are pitching your project to a group of investors or, a client. What is going to make this? So I had to tell people, like, take your designs, like you can still take something, maybe your thesis, but pitch this as if someone's going to buy into it and tell them why they need to do that. And so we found ran a couple of years in a row and said, and people, well, scared, like they like didn't know what to do. But I said, well, this is a skill that I think that is really valuable. So, I'll coach you. I'll give you like how I think you should do this. Not that I necessarily had the experience, but I felt, and this was kind of like part of like, the thing of like, making up as you go maybe. But if you want to create something and then find people to like participate in it, like you have to do the legwork. And so I felt in AIA, I've had that opportunity to say, if I want to create a program, I want to create, some sort of cause, or I want to like advance something that I think is missing, it's up to me to to do that. And others have done this with other, more pressing issue. I think that I'm talking about programming and maybe like mentoring career advancement, but a lot of other people have done this now with justice and climate and, EDI. I think that some of these programs did not exist just 5 years ago. And so people say, well, I want to do it. I want to start a women architecture group. I want to start a justice and inclusion group. I want to start a COAT. Maybe there isn't one in my chapter. And then you can tap into broader resources too, because both, national and state usually have something started. But you'd be surprised. Not every place has these things. So if you have a cause you're interested in and you have the time and talent to do it, to me, that's why I just really enjoyed being involved with AIA in particular. It was that I want to help mentor people, but along the way, I think that if people say, hey, give me some ideas and then I'll support you to do it. To me, that's like any special project, right? Like who else is telling that you can do that?
And I know I get a lot of questions from recent graduates and really young professionals asking me, why should I join the AIA? What would it do for me? Do you have advice that you usually give or comments back when you get those questions?
I mean, I actually don't feel like I've gotten a lot of that questions over the years, or that. I mean, I know it is a question, right? People are questioning. I don't know. They've always done. I mean, there might be some questions right now currently, but people have always said, like, why do this? Like, why should a firm support it, right? I haven't always had all my firms support it, so sometimes I had to, pay my own dues. But it's always easier if you have a firm that's at least splitting half of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, it's still the network that I think it's harder in a big city. I mean, I think I would question it more if I was in a smaller chapter. Like, I think maybe if I was in Lancaster and I didn't have like a critical mass of kind of colleagues who I could meet with, because you might only have like 10 like it's a little bit bigger than that. But if you're some of these chapters,
we won't tell
really,
them.
yeah, some of these chapters, geographically are large, right? So if you look at Pennsylvania, the middle chapter, as it's called,
Mm-hmm.
goes from the New York State to the Maryland State border, and from Harrisburg to like Greensburg, right? And in that group, there's like 30 architects. It is very difficult to create like a network at this, what I would see the same value as being like in Philadelphia. So
Yeah, even Pittsburgh's smaller than Philly in terms of our chapters, and like we're not as small as Central, but there's still that, if I saw 30 people at an event in Pittsburgh, like that's some of the bigger events, whereas some of the smaller YAF events sometimes get smaller than that, but it's like, okay, there's still like a good collection, but then you kind of get to know people a little bit more at that level when it's smaller. But the committee options vary from chapter to chapter. Like, it wasn't until I started looking into what other chapters were doing that it's like, oh, we have a committee of that? Like, Pittsburgh doesn't have that. Should we have that? And it just starts a conversation when you start looking at it broader. But I know I always tell people the network side in terms of getting involved and just knowing people in your region, because you never know when you could need a letter of recommendation for some kind of scholarship or grant to go to a conference, or you get laid off. And if you're a young architect, your network may not be that big. You talked about moving to Philly. Like, you didn't have that many college classmates go to Philly, so you didn't have that network. Whereas if you need to pivot or move or change or just see what's going on in other firms to see how you're learning, it's a good way to meet people outside your office.
yeah, so I mean, I guess I could, again, what benefited me, I'll say, if we look at a couple of different things, one, starting at that small firm level and doing a lot of housing, I thought it was important to join the AIA. First it was to give back, but also like for me to expand my own kind of knowledge base about architecture. I'm doing a very small thing, and not that I was necessarily interested in healthcare design, but like if I wasn't going to other events and getting exposed to like different ideas, it could very well just be like doing the same thing in the same small kind of like mentality. And so I think, to me, that's a reason why I benefited. So I didn't always have to just be interested in like the day-to-day job, but I think there's also this leadership opportunities. Now, not everybody can be a leader. So in Philadelphia, you have a chapter of 1,500 people, give or take, members. They all can't be leaders of committees. But me personally, if I didn't have the opportunity to lead in my own firm, or I was involved in like a local civic association at the time, like I was searching out for ways to get more leadership experience. And AIA is a natural place, I think, for architects to do that. So whether if you were in AIS or some other, group, or you wanted to just say like, how do I find a way to gain leadership skills? And, I think that you don't know this type of stuff until you go out and you try to like, lead a group of people. Like if you're not doing it at your firm, like you can learn so much by like, again, doing marketing, doing, cold call. I mean, like I can't like, so I'm kind of going back locally, but a lot of the things that I've done program wise required me to just call people, cold. I mean, it's cool. I mean, I might not have called them in the beginning. I think now I'm at a point that I will still cold call people if I want to like do something. If there's a person I want to invite to a panel, I will call them up and pitch. And I think the only reason I have that skill is because of the years I've spent doing an AIA and saying, if I want this thing to be successful, I got to find out how I get a certain contributor, a certain panelist. There's no one else going to do it for me, so I would do it. And I feel comfortable. I think that, especially if you look at, if we haven't even really touched on connection very much, but kind of the thing that was, I still consider my greatest kind of accomplishment was doing this, running this magazine for YF. And what I would say was keeping it to like, I'm going to say whether it's true or not, right? I always like to say, like, I think we were holding like very high journalistic standards, right? We were going after content that would be the same type of content that the AIA National could get. Sure, maybe they could get it more easy or could get it easier because, they just have the clout to do it. But I was getting contributors at that level that would be a feature article in Architect magazine. I think we were able to get those people to write something or to interview them. And again, the only reason we were doing that was because either me or someone else on my kind of editorial staff was out making those pitches and saying, well, why should I spend my time doing this? Well, this is why, right? This is who it's going to help. This is who's going to read it. This is why I think you should be part of it. We're doing an issue on climate change, resiliency this year, or this month. And so doing that pitching, I think is the type of thing that, you have to go and give presentations. If I wasn't giving presentations in my work life, this was another way that I could expand and build that skill set. The next time someone asks me to do a presentation, I am ready for it because I have done so much kind of pitching and selling my ideas and trying to convince someone to do something, right?
Yeah, because there's so much you can do, and I even learn through podcasting. I generally just reach out to people. A lot of the times I don't know them ahead of time, and so it's reaching out to see if somebody will talk to me. And sometimes they're busy, and sometimes it's, sure, I'll do it. Let's go for it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to be talking to this person. So
yeah, so you probably experienced that, going through this now, is that, I think that sometimes it might not be as heavy a lift as you think it is until you ask, right? And then there's people who you might have to ask again. I don't think there are people that I really hounded, but there are people that I might have pursued who didn't have the time. I would, I'd follow up. I would let them go if unless they were truly saying like, no, I'm not interested. But, if someone says, I just can't do it this time around, they try to give you an excuse. Well, there's a salesmanship in this.
Welcome back. And the final fellow I want to introduce you to is a brand new AIA fellow, Graciela Carrillo. I interviewed her. She was episode number 47, and I interviewed her prior to her being a fellow. And so we talk about her AIA leadership through COVID and being in New York City and how it is to be in the public sector rather than the private sector of architecture. So we don't dive in her episode on what it's like to become a fellow, but she is a brand new fellow. So I wanted to celebrate her with this episode and congratulate her along the way. So hope you guys learn a little bit about her experience and journey through her episode and be an inspiration to you that maybe next year you can become an AIA fellow. So hope you guys enjoy this conversation with Graciela. And again, her episode was number 47.
what will the role shifting over to the board be coming up? Or you shifting out of strategic council and onto the board? Or are you keeping an arm in both?
No, so the strategic council is 3 years. This is my third year, so it will be my final. The moderator role within the strategic council is 1 year, so I will be done with the moderator this year. And then in January, I'll roll onto the board full time.
Got it. I guess what are the time commitments of those? Are they like regular weekly meetings, evenings, monthly?
So for the strategic council, the study groups itself is once a month. They have like an hour and a half meeting internally just to go over all the research work. The council itself, we get together 4 times a year, 2 times in person and 2 times virtual, or it could be maybe 2 or 3 times virtual. And we also started doing, we call them connection meetings. So it's like informal meetings once a month just to talk about whatever we want to talk about, but the study groups. So it's sort of like a connection time so we can create community within the council and not just work on research and data and studies. So we started that this year. And so we have the months that we're not getting together as a group, like going through studies, we just do that meeting just to chat about life.
Yeah. No, that's great having those meetups, because I feel like a lot of bigger councils or groups or initiatives, even within offices, it's always just, what are you meeting about, and trying to check off things. And I think spending that time to get to know your peers, because the whole point of AIA is the network and growing the community and growing the profession. And so I always feel like you need that relaxed time where it's not so structured to learn a little bit about each other. So I think that's fantastic. Shifting over to AIA Long Island president time year. So that was backtracking a little bit. So that was what, 2020 and 2021 for that?
Yes.
So
2 years.
How was that experience, one, moving into a president position, but also right in the heart of COVID?
So I was all excited and I had all the plans in the world and I had this agenda, in these meetings. And we did the installation of the board in January, like at the end of January. We went to grassroots. It was New Orleans, I remember, in March. So I was there as the president representing. And when we are in New Orleans is when actually they started talking about COVID, and we're like, oh my God, we're here. I wonder if we're going to get sick. But you don't know what it was. Like you heard about it. And then when we came back, it was total closure of everything. So I was like, so what are we going to do? So we started right away doing online meetings. I signed up with Zoom. I figured out how it worked. We did the first webinar in April and we talked about, working remote. I was the facilitator of the panel discussion. That's when I learned that when you're in a webinar, you couldn't have people on camera or mics on. And I was very disappointed. I'm like, we wanted people to talk and we can't because I set it up, the webinar, as a webinar. Yeah. But I didn't know those things at that time. And I didn't read the instructions. This was like, do it quick. We need to set this up. Just do it. So anyway, I learned a lot about how to facilitate things online. And we just were very creative to make sure that we kept everybody engaged. So all the chapters, and this is not just Long Island, we started doing happy hours, different sessions that talk about different things, just to keep people on the screen and talking to each other, not to lose that connection. So that was great because I pretty much was on my computer every day and every week. Like we had an event and every day we had a meeting. So it was actually very intensive. It's not like if you were a president during COVID time, you really didn't do anything. I think we did even more because Now online, you have to be available 24 hours, pretty much 7 days. So I was super busy during those 2 years. And then when everything opened, going back to hosting in-person events, we did our first design awards ceremony online, and we hired actually a production company. I had to go to one of these green rooms and record my speech. And my speech was 3 minutes long, and it took me an hour recording because they always like, no, you're saying this wrong. No, this is, oh my God, it was so frustrating.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't believe
Rather
this is
than
happening.
doing it live and, if there's little mess ups, nobody's going to notice
Oh
anyway.
yeah, no, everything had to be super, super like perfect. So it was a great production. Actually, I'm very proud of the work that we did with the chapter, and it was all a learning experience, but it was a great experience. And that's when I also started a website that it was called Powerful Speeches Women in Architecture, because I realized everybody's doing all these meetings online. I am the co-founder and co-chair of the Women in Architecture Committee in Long Island. And I was like, all these Women in Architecture Committee are doing so many amazing events that I get anxiety when I don't know what's going on and I cannot register. So I created this website where I was compiling all the events happening around the state. So they would send me the different chapters. Oh, we're going to have this event this day, whatever. So I would put that in the calendar, and people at that time were using that just to sign up for different events. Of course, it's not working anymore because everybody's doing now things in person more than online. So I'm not updating that anymore. But that website also, I created all the podcasts by women, which I'm not sure if I put yours already. I think I did. If I didn't, I'm going to put it because I started compiling a bunch of podcasts about women in architecture, and also different websites that support women in architecture. So that website is all about women in architecture. We did a survey for salaries of women specifically in architecture, because when you go to any survey website, you don't get the real picture. You get just average salary. And we know that women get paid 12 cents less than a man. So we wanted to do this survey just to see what was the salary reality for women in architecture. So it's organized by state and also by positions and experience. So that was also compiling that website. But now that I'm talking about that website, I need to update that website.
Yeah, and it's so much of a conversation. I actually, before I created MentorDino, I did a Pittsburgh equity in architecture survey trying to dive into Pittsburgh, because when you look at like the AIA calculator, they group cities. So Pittsburgh tends to get grouped with Philadelphia, which is very different than us, and we get grouped with New York, and very different on the cost of living.
Yeah.
And so I did that, I think, in 2019, and I had a lot of professionals use that as leverage to ask for a raise once they got to see behind the curtain of just our local community. And then I did it again in 2023 as I transitioned to MentorDino, and it was kind of a great like pre and post COVID numbers and seeing how things have changed, but there's still the pay discrepancies, and just trying to help people out locally is really important. People just want to have information to know what's going on, and that can help them. But when it's bigger, vague areas, then they don't have the clout to like step forward and speak up because they don't have that proof. I even had firms reach out to me like, hey, what goes into the number for this? Because they were using it to also set up for positions and what people are looking for. And I was like, oh, I'm honored. Like I was just thinking I was going to be helping out an individual or two that, needs some help, and ended up helping firms in the region too. So
that's great. That's really, really great.
Yeah, but definitely little things like that is fantastic. So definitely get the website updated.
Yeah, I have to.
And so what are you doing on the Women in Architecture Committee side?
So on the Women in Architecture, I'm still co-chairing that event. Actually, last night we we were part of the golf outing of the chapter. We gave 4 scholarship for women in architecture, like students, architectural students. We do that every year. We started 3 years ago with that scholarship. So throughout the year, we host about 3 to 4 events. At the beginning, we were hosting like 7, 8 events, and it was really just crazy. We're like, no, this is too much for us. So we slowed down the last couple of years. We said we're just going to do 3 or 4 a year. But it's good. We started in 2018 with 5 members, and we are 16 now, like active committee members. So I'm very proud of that group. It's a really good support network. We help each other a lot. And I would never change that for anything, because we call it our sisterhood. It's our local sisterhood. We can talk about whatever we want and always come up with a solution if anybody's struggling with anything.
Yeah. And I know the AIA within the bigger New York City has different, I guess, I don't even know if I want to call it sub-members. Like AIA Long Island is one area. Like, does the Bronx have something different because New York is so large? But then did those groups talk to each other?
So New York City, which is the 5 boroughs, they each have a chapter, an AIA chapter. Long Island is outside the 5 boroughs. So New York State has 13 chapters all told. So it's upstate New York, Long Island area, the 5 boroughs, Westchester, and upstate. I already said that. So the 5 chapters, they talked a lot in between of them. And also Long Island. We do host things together with Brooklyn, with Queens, with New York, sometimes, especially like the emerging professionals, they get together, they host things together. So it's in New York State, they have their, their regular meetings where they invite all the presidents all the time from all the chapters. So they all communicate each other frequently.
Yeah. I just wasn't sure how that worked, because I know in Pennsylvania, we don't have as many, and like Pittsburgh's over in one area, but we don't cross as much. Like when COVID happened, they did what's called Palm. So you kind of have subgroups, and it's a student, a young professional, recently licensed, senior, and a principal. And during COVID, they blended Philly and Pittsburgh, which was kind of nice. So then you could kind of learn people across the state, but then you miss that, hey, we're all going to a bar after work, and that local side. So
welcome back. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode on AIA fellowship between a more senior AIA fellow, a newer fellow that's on the real estate development side, and a brand new fellow going into 2025, and having that conversation with her on the podcast prior to her being an AIA fellow. So I hope you see that there's different routes and paths, not only in your career, but also to AIA fellowship, that you learned a little bit about the components of being a fellow and finding the component that best fits you if you are inspired to be an AIA fellow, and getting some advice on starting to gathering information. If AIA fellowship is one of your goals, start saving information and paperwork along the way on things you do and achieve, write, anything. So then you can help to build up your case in the future. So hopefully you've learned from these 3 episodes, and you can always learn more by diving into their full episode. Edmond's was episode number 10, Jeff episode number 39, and Graciela was episode number 47. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career, that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.